Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Geek, and welcome to the first episode of the Iconicast Podcast. If you are watching this on my YouTube channel, you might be wondering, what is that? What's different about it? I don't understand. And that's because this is a podcast that I used to do way back in the day, and I've decided one of the places or platforms I'm going to air it is YouTube, just as usual on my channel. So if you're watching as your YouTube subscriber, then this might not seem all that different to you, except for the sound quality, the music, the structure of it a little bit. But in this first episode, I'm going to go over two things. I'm going to talk about first the history of the Iconicast podcast, what this is and what it's about. And then in terms of content for this episode, we're going to talk about physical media. So join me for that. Hopefully it'll be a new experience for those on YouTube and for those who are discovering this on one of the podcast platforms that I put it on as well. Hopefully this will be enjoyable for you too. So to describe where Iconicast came from, really have to go back to 2013. Man of Steel had come out, Zack Snyder's tragedy of a incarnation or interpretations of the DC universe. And I was already studying superheroes and scholarship in my own scholarship, the archetypes, how these characters are popular shared fictions work as our mythologies. I was already studying that and talking about that a lot. Didn't have a YouTube channel yet or anything like that. But then these deconstructions of these heroes started coming out. Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, so many years after that, of course, Star Wars did the same thing. Disney did the same thing with Luke Skywalker and so forth. And that just really became the norm. It became the thing that people crave. Let's muddy up these heroes, especially our aspirational heroes. Let's bring them down to our level. Let's make them more emotionally or motivationally dismal and complex, quote unquote. But really just muddying them up and trying to take away their high moral standards. So obviously I had a big problem with that. I've spoken about it a lot on my channel for those who follow me there. And the first thing I did was I was worried. Okay, obviously a lot of people were rejecting this idea that this could be Superman. Of course not, everybody, because in the culture for so long, just organically for decades, whether it was the comics or the Christopher Reeve films or Smallville or whatever, even Superman Returns to a certain extent, we knew the character to be this iconic hero, this standard who wouldn't do X. He wouldn't cross certain lines. He wouldn't do these things. The same thing was being done with Batman. Not so long ago, believe it or not, if you had told a Batman fan that you have a story where Batman's brutally just beating the snot out of all these people on the street and doing it in a very vengeful manner, most Batman fans would have said, well, that's not Batman. Today, that's what most quote unquote Batman fans want out of a Batman story. It's so if the culture is saturated with this one image or interpretation, and that's linked to a character's name, it is only a matter of time before the new generations come in and that's all they know. That becomes what they associate with that hero or that character. And I knew that this was bad for society because these characters have evolved and they held a place. They did a cultural work for us. They do work in our society mythologically. And so I knew that if you take that away, if you start associating other things or the opposite of these archetypes with these characters, then that was going to hurt society. It would have to adapt in some which way or another. So at that time, not having any experience, I was a teacher. I could still speak publicly, but not really having any experience recording myself or anything like that. I instead started a Facebook page, right? That was, at least more popular back in the day. And I started a Facebook page, first called it The Iconic Superman. And that got really popular. And the whole idea was to let's keep pushing images and stories. And I would publish my writings about these characters on my blog and from my scholarship, and keep pushing images and story recommendations and trying to get the image out of what the true, real, iconic Superman is supposed to be and not this new stuff they're trying to make him into. That became so popular that it branched off into an iconic Wonder Woman, iconic Batman. I had other people coming along running their own iconic pages and sort of synchronicity with mine. And it was really great. And that grew to the point where we thought, well, we need a podcast as well, because we need to say more than just what we can write on a post. And so we started the Iconicast Podcast, named for the iconic web pages, our Superman, our Facebook pages that we had created. And those pages are still around. You can still find them. I don't think anybody's really updating them right now because that's, it's yesteryear's thing. But it's still there and still great content to see. Just the real images of these characters. It's beautiful to see. So we had the Iconicast podcast that ran in conjunction with those pages for a while. And it was great. What we did on the Iconicast podcast we would talk about some of the new good stuff that was coming out. When Marvel was still doing great stuff at the time. This was long before Captain Marvel or Endgame or any of that. And we would really talk about older stories, things that people should check out. So I remember when it came to Spider-Man, we were talking about Spider-Man Blue. We were talking about old stories, old iterations of Batman, Wonder Woman, and so forth. And it was a lot of fun, really, pushing these stories back into the spotlight and trying to let people have that doorway into experiencing them for the first time or rediscovering them or whatever. Eventually, though, if culture is just, as I feared, so saturated with this one take or these deconstructions of the characters, eventually people get tired of fighting. They get tired. They want to consume. That's they want to just go to the movies and enjoy themselves, and they stop wanting to think critically, and they stop wanting to have to be discerning. It's just the nature of it. So that was starting to happen with some of the people that had come around me, falling off. One of the co-hosts of the Iconicast Podcast decided that she was in support of Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman and Brie Larson's Captain Marvel and all this stuff. Well, that was clearly you couldn't get more polar opposite of the mission of the podcast. Even Big Al, my best buddy Big Al, decided that he was just wanted to enjoy Disney Star Wars, And so it eventually just became the point. It was one of those, and then there was one situations, not in terms of friendship. Al and I are still the bestest of friends ever, but in terms of the mission of that podcast, it was just me. And I thought, well, I'm not done fighting, but I thought maybe this is a good transition time to move from a podcast to a YouTube channel. And that's when I started the Professor Geek YouTube channel, because I could focus it, since it was just me, I could focus it a little bit more on my scholarship and talking and calling out what's wrong with these stories, reviewing the new stuff and talking about where it got it wrong. And that was 6 or 7 years ago or something like that. And I'm still doing that today, and it's great. But there's a change. The change nowadays, and those who watch my channel a lot or my live streams have heard me talk about this for a while, it's really just kind of pointless to continue to review the new stuff that comes out. We are to the point now where it really is a rare unicorn of a piece of media that comes out today as something new and is actually any good. It does happen, right? People talked about the Maverick Top Gun thing, came out that was good. I've talked about the Guardians of the Galaxy video game that actually somehow managed to be really good, that was released, recently. So it does happen, but it's to the point where it's such a rarity that there's really just no point. I think that people who continue to review everything new and to, fight the good fight and all of that kind of stuff, as I've said, they're just really in it for clicks. They're just in it to make the money, to get, play into the algorithm and so forth. And that's not anything that I'm in here for. I'm here mainly to be true to and maintain my integrity and my beliefs about these characters, because I dearly love them. So I thought, well, okay, if now is a good transition time again, I'm still running my YouTube channel. I just run it a little bit differently, but I thought maybe a good way to mark this transition is to bring back the Iconicast Podcast. I'll just run it myself, and I'll bring back the Iconicast Podcast. I'll put it on my YouTube channel, but also the other platforms, and really focus on great stories. I'll work in some of my work on archetypes and my scholarship there. I'll work in book studies and celebrations of the great stuff to pass. I'll try to steer people towards the good stuff they can discover, because one of the things I find of a lot of people who come to my YouTube channel, for example, will tell me, I used to think these were good stories, but then I realized what you were saying and I kind of got it. And now I'm looking for some of the good stuff of the past. And, some of these people are younger. They don't, haven't lived through some of the great stories that we have, who might be able to more readily recommend this or that. And some of them are just, recommendations abound. Everyone is so quick to give you a recommendation, but they don't realize that you have to kind of earn the right to give someone a recommendation. It's easy if you're on a public platform like this. I can give as many recommendations as I want on a podcast or a video, because you don't have to take me seriously. Plus, I'm not talking directly to you. When someone comes up to you personally and says, I recommend that you watch this, there's a certain assumption they're making. They're saying, I know you well enough to know that you will like this. And I think people do that way too freely. You have to earn the right to give somebody a recommendation. Now, on a platform like this, I'm not talking to you personally. We're not face to face. I don't know you, but you can kind of get to know me. You can kind of get to know at least my beliefs and opinions about these things. And you can know, okay, would my enjoyment of a piece of media align with maybe his? And if you think that's true, then you can check out the things that I'm recommending. And I will do more than just recommend. I'm going to be reviewing. We're going to be talking about studying, even analyzing a lot of these stories, and giving the behind the scenes, why these work archetypically, why they work from a good storytelling perspective. I am a writer, a storyteller as well. So that's what the podcast is going to be about. And I think a lot of people uh, are looking for something like this, at least in what they've told me. We'll see. We'll see how popular it is. Like I said, it'll still be on my YouTube channel, but it'll also be broadcast the other places. Right now, I'm committing to once a month. So this is season 1, episode 1. I'm committing to 1 season, 1 year, 12 episodes, and we'll see how well it goes. And I'd love to continue doing it if it's well received, and if I learn, got ideas for other segments and things to put in. I have ideas to keep it going moving forward. So we shall see. But that's the history. That's what Iconicast Podcast is. And next up, when we come back, we will talk about our first topic, which is the importance of, and in my own unique spin on, physical media.
Hi folks, this is Matt Wilkins from the self-titled YouTube channel, Matt Wilkins. I want to invite you to come listen to the channel. We talk about the Star Wars Expanded Universe, board games. I have 2 podcasts that go on YouTube and iTunes called Prince of the Universe, where we talk about movies, TV, anything geeky and in the past we want to talk about. And then Saturday morning Salmon Flange, we give a top 5 of some random subject every week. So won't you come on and check it out? That's Matt Wilkins on YouTube.
Okay, so the importance of owning physical media is nothing new. You're certainly not going to hear about it for the first time from me, right? This is something that everybody's been talking about. And it is important, in the convenience of today's live streaming or streaming software technology. It is very convenient. It's very true. It's convenient to be able to just click from your couch rather than get up and get a piece of media and put it in something else and then, change it over and so forth. So there's the convenience of streaming. The problem, as many people have pointed out, though, is that you don't truly own anything you buy digitally, streaming-wise, like stored on somebody else's platform. I mean, you can buy something you own digitally. I've bought some Nintendo Switch games, but I own them on a card, a memory card that I have, and I can back it up on my computer and so forth. So you can own things digitally in that way, but you do have to own the physical, something that you can hold, something that you can take with you that is not dependent on an internet connection. That's important because they can take it away from you. And there have been stories about this or that streaming service losing the license to these movies, losing the license to a whole library of films and that people had paid for, and suddenly they're gone. I mean, you can look up a lot of stories about that. So that's one problem. That's one reason why it's important to own physical media. The second reason is that Hollywood is consistently and constantly changing the films, changing the stories, the songs, or whatever, your beloved songs. And they do this sometimes for licensing reasons and sometimes for ideological reasons. We are in a time where there's a set of ideologues who are trying to rewrite our history, our cultural history. They're trying to replace it in a lot of ways with remakes or live action remakes and stuff like that of beloved stories. And they're hoping that you'll come to like their version better than the beloved classic. And they'll play into the nostalgia of it. Disney does this all the time, but they're really trying to erase some things about a classic film that they think are problematic. So they can replace all that and redo it and put it with their ideological varnish on it and try to hope that replaces the classic's place in culture. So they are trying to replace things like that, but they're also simply making changes to songs, movies, television shows on these streaming services. And some people catch it and some people don't. There have been, famous examples are the Diversity Day episode from The Office. That's erased. If you're just watching The Office on Netflix or whatever platform it's currently on, you won't see the Diversity Day episode because that's deemed offensive. That's absurd, right? I mean, if you don't understand the humor and the commentary that the Diversity Day episode is trying to get across, then you really don't understand the humor or commentary of the Office series at all, right? I mean, it's that mockumentary, tongue-in-cheek. So it's just absurd to like start policing that and censoring different episodes. We don't want people exposed to that episode, and who are they to do that? Especially if you bought, the series, streaming wise or something like that. So you own it. You don't have to worry about that. You own the DVDs, the Blu-rays, whatever. Another aspect is sometimes things are changed simply for licensing purposes. I just learned the other day, or safety purposes. I've given an example before, Lilo and Stitch, the great Disney classic Lilo and Stitch. There's a scene in which Lilo's older sister is looking for her, and Lilo climbs into a dryer to hide from her. And Disney decided, well, that's not good. Children shouldn't see that. So they've changed it. And like in DVD releases, even that you get after a certain point, that dryer is suddenly like a wooden table cupboard that's just sort of randomly placed next to the washing machine now. And it's a little thing. Maybe, it doesn't affect the story, obviously, but it's just the principle of the thing that they will change things just because some sort of nanny state has come in and said, well, I don't think children should see that. And that's not the movie. That's not the scene that you grew up watching or saw at the theater or whatever. Another example, Wayne's World, the great Wayne's World that I love. There's that classic iconic moment where he's got the guitar in the music shop. This guitar he's been pining over, it will be mine. And he's, playing it, trying it out, and he plays it, and he starts playing Stairway to Heaven, like the first 3 notes of Stairway to Heaven. And it's recognizable, even though it's 3 notes, if you're a musician, as other musicians, Led Zeppelin. And for a long time, that was like the song that everybody tried playing, or everybody wanted to learn to play. You had to learn Zeppelin. You had to learn Stairway to Heaven. And so the funny joke of it is the person who's running the shop, who's giving him the guitar to try out, stops him, puts his hands on the fretboard, and points to a sign at the back that says "No Stairway to Heaven." It's funny because, like, you can imagine that they're sick of hearing it. And Wayne's like, "No stairway, denied." Well, they changed that. They changed the first 3 notes, so it's no longer at all recognizable as Stairway to Heaven. Now it's just some distorted feedback or whatever. And I mean, maybe that can still work as a joke because maybe he's playing it so poorly, but then how would the guy recognize it? It doesn't work. And I think all that was because of some licensing issue with the music, maybe. Changes like that. It doesn't matter why they're made. When they're made for ideological purposes, it ticks me off even more. But it doesn't really even matter why they're made. It's something different than what you are used to hearing, and you should have a right to discern what media you like, especially when you purchased it. And if you want to watch the same movie you saw in the theater, or if you want to listen to the same song on your stereo that you listened to, as a kid or whatever, you should be able to listen to the same version. A lot of times streaming services will only have remastered versions of music, and sometimes people prefer the remaster, sometimes they don't. There are instances, in fact, where a streaming service, I've run into this with Amazon streaming music. Sometimes you'll tell your Alexa or whatever to play a song that you loved, growing up, and you'll hear it and you'll think, okay, that is the song and that is the band. I mean, that's the guy's voice right there, but it just sounds different. And then you look into it and you realize it's a re-recording because the streaming service doesn't have the rights to the original recording that you used to listen to back in the day. So the band gets back into the studio and re-records some of their hits so that they can have rights to it to give it out to some of these streaming services. And I mean, I'm glad they at least do that, but it's not the same song, and it shouldn't be passed off as the same song. I mean, you can go through looking into the details of it and kind of figure it out, but no, physical media is just vitally important. It's vitally important to own physical media. There comes a problem with that, though. Okay, so, especially if you're thinking of physical media as a replacement to streaming, well, so many titles about any genre or platform are at your fingertips with streaming. And if you want to try to replace that with physical media, well, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of space. How can you even store all of that? And this is a sentiment that I first heard on a podcast from another YouTuber called Films at Home. He's got a huge podcast. He reviews a lot of the Blu-ray or UK Ultra, whatever, I'm blanking on the name of the format, but he reviews a lot of those releases and talks about the specs of them and whatnot. But he has a podcast that he started around a year ago at the time that I'm recording this first episode of my own podcast. And he came up with this idea. He said, the important thing about collecting physical media, and he's talking specifically about Blu-rays. Now, I'm a collector of DVDs, Blu-rays, CDs, for my music, and books. And I apply this to all of those 3 collections, and I'll talk about all 3 of those here in a moment. But he said it's important to not just collect, but to curate. Don't just add to your collection, curate your collection. And what he meant by that was the fact that, look, you only have time to watch so many movies. You only have time to listen to so many CDs, in my case, or whatever. you also only have so much space. You know, some people have huge houses. They're blessed with a lot of space, and that's great. Hey, fill up, make a museum, you know, if you want. That's wonderful. But most of us don't have very much space. Those of you watching on YouTube see my limited little space here that I'm still working on it. That wall is going to get moved back after a while, and you know, I'll add to it. But a lot of us have limited space to store things. And you can get to the point where you're just living in a very cluttered area. And if it gets to be so cluttered, you lose track of what you have and what you don't have. Some of your stuff gets put in storage. And, you know, depending on where your storage is or how easily it is to access, you might as well not even own it. I mean, you can't get to it, you know. And he said that, and he had a great comment on this. He said, you know, you curate your collection, you go through and you decide, do I need this DVD? Physical media is important, but do I need this one? If I already bought it on a different format, do I still need to keep this one? Do I need doubles? How long has it been? Okay, I watched that once, and maybe you were given the movie or DVD or whatever. Do you need to keep it? What's the likelihood you're really going to watch it again? And, you know, you go through and curate your collection, just like a curator at a museum would curate what's on display and what's in that museum's collection. And I thought that's such a great way of doing it. That's really the difference. Curation is really the difference between a collector and a hoarder. And I get there is that impetus. There's that desire to want to just hoard stuff. I mean, I remember I was in my early 20s. I was going to be a minister, right? You know, when I was still Protestant, I was going to be a minister. And I remember old preachers would say, well, I've got some of these old books I'm going to give, you know, try and cull my collection with a little bit. You want to come look at it? And I would go, yeah, which ones do you want? All of them, because you never know what you'll need, you know? And then I would just have tons of books, just boxes of them. And I'd try and store some of them. And so, you know, you start with good intentions. You're not technically a hoarder who can't get rid of ticket stubs necessarily, but you can kind of you get that hoarder mindset when you start collecting without a really good disciplined way of thinking about it. So curation is good. Going through your collection and deciding what do you really want in your collection. And one of the conclusions I came to myself after listening to the Films at Home talk on this is that your collection should say something about yourself. You know, if somebody comes into your house or into your, you know, man cave or woman cave or whatever, and they see your collection, it shouldn't just be all of the physical media you were able to lay your hands on in your lifetime. It should be things that say stuff about your taste. You know, why would you want a DVD in your collection that you watched once and you kind of don't really like all that much, but it's there, whatever. I was able to get a copy of it, so it's here. Well, why is it there? You know, one good way, if you're getting to the point where you want to curate your collection, one good way to think about it is, what does my collection say about me? Does it really reflect me and my interests and my tastes? And that doesn't always mean that you have to dearly love and be able to watch ad nauseum any film that you keep a copy of. Of course not. Because I study superheroes, I do have copies of some movies or versions of a hero or whatever that I don't want. Like I have copies that I don't want to watch ad nauseum. Like I have a copy of Chris Nolan's Batman Begins and The Dark Knight because I think they're important steps in the development of Batman's portrayal publicly. So I've got them for reference purposes, you know. I don't know if I'm ever going to seriously rewatch them, maybe once more in my lifetime or something, but I don't really like that version of Batman. I don't think it is you know, I mean, there are good things about those films. I don't hate them. I'm certainly not going to own Zack Snyder's movies because I hate them. I don't want to own them and take up space. But, you know, so it doesn't mean that every copy of everything that you have has to be something that you automatically watch again right now, but you make those decisions. Another aspect that I heard some other collectors talk about is your collection is made to be enjoyed. You do see a lot of people, you know, they show their collections off and you'll see shrink wrap still on some of these copies of the things they have. And, you know, as you go through and curate, you know, one of the things to ask is it something I'd ever watch again, but is it something you would enjoy? You know, I have a lot of CDs here, no more. I mean, I'd like to have a lot more, and other people have a vastly bigger collection, but I enjoy these CDs. I take them out and listen to them. If I'm at a place where just streaming is absolutely like, I like the version that's on streaming or whatever, maybe you stream it, but then I'll still take out the CD from the rack and be able to look at the liner notes and look at the song, you know, credits and so forth. You know, it's important. I handle these. It's physical media is made to be handled. It's made to have that touchstone, you know, physically and you know, the ritual of placing it into a player and so forth. So movies, books, DVDs, or whatever, comic collectors fall into this trap a lot. Well, I had to collect the whole run just so I can have the whole run. Do you even like that run? You know, when New 52 came out, And that was one of the things we spoke against a lot in the Iconicast podcast back in the day. But I knew collectors who agreed with me, Superman fans who agreed with me that the New 52 Superman or Flash or whatever was just awful. And yet they were still collecting. Well, I always collect the Superman comics that come out. I need to have the whole set. Why? If you utterly loathe what they're doing, why own it? And I fell into this trap a little bit when I was collecting after DC Rebirth, when they were really trying to bring things back and just make things work and really repair what the New 52 had done. But then they lost the plot, right? Dan DiDio got in charge and again got some power again, and they just started veering off of what they were doing with Rebirth. And for a while there, I was still collecting comics, still had them pulled in my inbox, so I bought them and hadn't read them much, and then I realized, I've got a good chunk of comics here that I need to get rid of, sell them or something like that, because I don't like them anymore. They're not the kind of treatments of these characters that I want, and these need to go, so they went. So you curate your collection. You're not a hoarder. You want to be a collector, a curator, not a hoarder. And then make sure that you're enjoying your collection. Make sure that you're enjoying it. So that's two things, and I'm just kind of giving my commentary. Make sure that your collection says something about you, and ask yourself at every given time, you start to accumulate a lot more stuff. Periodically, you need to go through and look at your collection and say, what is this saying about me here? I got some new stuff. Do I maybe need to part with some of these or whatever? You ask yourself, and only you can decide that. I'm not telling you to go in and give away a bunch of your collection or whatever. I'm just putting these ideas out there and how they've helped me and my own conclusions that I've come to through them. The last thing I'll say about collecting, though, is if you maybe are new to physical media collecting, and you try to watch some channels, some podcasts or whatever to hear about it, there are a lot of great resources out there, and they're wonderful. I'm thankful that these resources are out there. But one of the things I've noticed when I watch a lot of reviews or watch a lot of resources on collecting is that there's this automatic privileging of the newest technology. And it's really weird, especially when it comes to movies. It's to the point now where DVDs are almost just sort of sneered at. It's really silly. And you'll have people who will do videos like, well, why I would still collect a DVD? And there has to be all these like special circumstances met. I would keep a DVD if that version was never really well translated to Blu-ray or 4K or if, whatever. And I don't feel that way. I don't need the best tech specifics. Now, part of that is because I'm a story person. Look, I grew up in the rural area. We got NBC if the weather was good by antenna, and that was it. That was it. We had to rent a VCR if we wanted movies, and eventually we bought a VCR. But even then, it was you had the quality that you had. And I didn't need a crystal clear picture. And even, once technology became more prevalent and, we got, cable, and I grew up and had my own services and so forth, I don't need to watch. I'll give you an example. Stargate SG-1. I have that full collection on DVD, and it's a really great set. It's the old DVD sets where it used to be like a whole big box for one season. Now they can fit the whole series on a disc if they wanted to. But, I have those old collections, and they're DVDs. They're not videotapes. A videotape will rot and stuff like that. And I can watch those DVDs, and I'm re-experiencing the story in the exact same way that I experienced it back in the day. I mean, even before I had a flat screen TV, I was watching, Stargate SG-1 back in the day, and I loved it. And I love watching those DVDs and seeing the story with that same sort of graininess of, the old film and the DVD. I love that. I don't need to be able to count the goosebumps on Colonel O'Neill's neck to enjoy Stargate SG-1. And I see reviews of this, and there are a lot of reviews because it was recently released on Blu-ray, and it's a nice set. And I'm looking at the side-by-side comparisons, and I'm thankful to the channels that do side-by-side comparisons. That's great. I'm not criticizing anybody who does want the higher quality everything. That's great. If that's your thing, if story really isn't your thing, if the specs are your thing, if the audio, if the picture, then hey, you do you. That's great. But what I'm doing is speaking against this sort of impulse by a lot of people. I even heard one DVD collector say, or the movie collector collecting Blu-ray in HK or 4K. And he said, DVDs, they're getting to be where they're kind of like unwatchable. I'm thinking, Unwatchable. Boo-hoo you and your first world problems. I mean, unwatchable? A DVD, for crying out loud? So I would caution people, unless that's really your thing, unless your thing is the highest specs on visual and audio, whatever, unless that's what you're really interested in, and that's fine if it is, but don't let other people try to discourage you, because you can maybe just want to get into physical media and be overwhelmed. Oh, you need this kind of 4K TV, and you need these surround sounds, and then you need to go spend $80 on a 4K disc or collection or whatever. You don't need to do any of that. You start with what you have, and you enjoy what you enjoy. You can't see it on screen on YouTube, but I have a CRTV right here, an old DVD VHS combination, which I love. I play my N64 on that. I don't want a HD modded N64. I want to play it like I played it back in the day, and see the screen as I saw it back in the day. And it's not to say I would never upgrade. Like, I have the Stargate SG-1 DVD set, which I dearly love. It's enough for me. But when the Stargate SG-1 Blu-ray does come down in price a little bit, I might buy it, just because apparently Blu-rays are supposed to last a little bit longer than DVDs. And I've already had these DVDs a while. They've been with me through a lot of moves and whatnot. They still play well. There's no scratches, but just for the sake of longevity, if it's a story or series that I dearly love, like SG-1, yeah, I might have a nice backup that's a higher quality, something that'll last a little longer, like a Blu-ray of SG-1. Sure, I'm not saying I wouldn't get it. But I'm about to upgrade now. You have reasons for upgrade, right? I have all but two of the Underworld movies. I really like those Underworld movies. Kate Beckinsale, Kevin Grivo. I always pronounce his name wrong, but the writer, he played one of the Lycans in the first one. I met him at a con. He was talking about the writing of the movies and the idea of the movie and everything, and really liked those movies. And I've got some really nice DVD versions, collector DVD versions that I love. And I wanted to collect to finish my set, to get the movies I was missing from that set. And I saw that, well, really just for a little bit more, I could get the one complete Blu-ray set of all the movies for just a little bit more than it would cost me anyway to buy these extra DVDs of the movies that I'm missing. So I thought, well, I'll go ahead and do that. Okay. Then I can sell the DVDs that I have, and that's curating my collection, right? I don't need to have 2 or 3 DVDs copies of the same movies that I have all on Blu-ray. That's okay. So I'll do that. That, if it works out like that, I can do that. But the need to upgrade, I don't own a 4K TV. I don't own any kind of elaborate speaker system. I have some good headphones. That's my good audio, but I don't have a 4K TV. I can't imagine ever buying a 4K player. Sony has not given me any reason to buy a PS5 yet. I keep waiting for them to, but they just keep putting out crap game after crap game that I'm not interested in. So I have no reason to even buy a PS5, which plays 4K DVDs. So I mean, sure, one day I'll probably have a 4K TV when they've gone down in price, and there's 3 more advanced iterations of stories beamed into your brain by then or whatever. Yeah, maybe I'll get a 4K TV. I keep saying that. When mine dies, when my flat screen dies, or is it a plasma TV I have, or LCD? I don't even know. I'm not a spec guy, right? But I do have a nice flat screen TV, as well as my CRTVs and stuff. So I don't need to go upgrade. I don't need to buy. I have some 4K discs that just happened to come in a package where it was Blu-ray, DVD, and 4K. That's the good deal I got or whatever. But I just don't need the highest specification. Even when it comes to music, it's kind of interesting because, in music, you have some vinyl people who are like, oh, no, you need the vinyl. And that's not the highest technical specifications of a CD, right? But that's a little bit more accepted to be more of a vinyl preference than it is to be a DVD preference over a Blu-ray. If I was watching, again, I'll always want a DVD copy of something like Stargate SG-1 or Farscape. Or I'm trying to think of some other examples. I mean, sometimes there are classic films that just were never even well translated to DVD. So if they can rush that up better, sure. But, I have DVD copies of Rear Window. I'm a big Hitchcock fan. I'm a big film noir fan. And I have a little film noir collection. I don't need them all in crystal clear Blu-ray. I mean, people watch these on scratchy films in theaters, and I remember watching these on TMC. I always get that wrong. But, watching them on the projector in my high school film class and whatnot. I don't need to be able to count the mole hairs on an actor or actress to enjoy the story. So if given the choice, once I do have a Stargate SG-1 Blu-ray set, which I'll check it out, it'll be a nice backup, but maybe I'll watch like season 10 or 9 that were actually filmed in HD. Maybe I try watching them in Blu-ray. But given the choice, I'm going to go to my DVD set because I like that look. I want to see it like I saw it on my TV back in the day in the late 90s, watching this series and loving it. One example I have a couple examples that I'll show to kind of wrap this up. One example is just to give a caveat and reasons why some remasters and things like that are good and can be good. I recently picked up, I'm a big Van Halen fan. Love Van Halen. Really love the Sammy Hagar Van Halen. Though I like the David Lee Roth, heck, even Gary Cherone era had something for me to enjoy. But Sammy Hagar is my man, and I really love that iteration of Van Halen with Sammy Hagar. And for the longest time, they wouldn't release any kind of remasters of the Sammy Hagar albums. And that was because of the feuds, with Eddie and Alex and stuff like that in the band and whatnot, Hagar. But that eventually stopped. Tragically, it took Eddie's, tragic passing to make that stop. But we've got, at least an agreement that this could be released. And it is the Van Halen, I think it's called the Van Halen 2 remaster or whatever. I forget the total name for it. But it gives the years there. I can't read in this low light. But I've got in this collection, it came out in vinyl and CD. Of course, I got CD because I'm just not a vinyl person. I'm a CD guy. And it's great. I've got 5150, OU812, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, Balance, and then it's got an extra DVD of some special songs unreleased or studio stuff, cuts and whatnot. And this is great. I'm not a super stickler for the perfect audio. I'm a bass player, so I like to be able to hear the bass really well. But even I did notice that the OU812 album in particular wasn't ever mixed or mastered all that well, whatever the technical words for it were. It needed something more. And I'm so glad it finally got that, because this version of all these albums really pop. It's well done, in my opinion. If you're a Van Halen fan, especially if you're a fan of the Sammy Hagar years of Van Halen, this is worth it. It's a little pricey. I picked it up for Christmas. Really good stuff. So there are instances, case by case instances where maybe it's worth it to you to buy the new. I've also got the old CDs, the CDs as they were bought or sold back in the day. So there are cases in which maybe it's worth it to you to upgrade. But I'll give you an instance in which I don't care to upgrade. I really don't care to upgrade. Again, maybe if someone dropped the Blu-rays of these movies or shows in my lap, just for the sake of longevity, I might have them in case these ever run out. But here's an example of something that I just never feel the need to upgrade. I'm a big fan of Star Trek, the original series. That's all. I really don't care about other Star Treks. It's just the original series that I personally like. And back in the day, before Blu-rays were really the thing and all of that, they had this clamshell, you can hear it, clamshell copies of this seasons. And I've got all 3 seasons. Season 1 came in yellow, season 2 in blue, and season 3 in red. And it's this really cool, like, clamshell. You open it up like this, and then the DVDs and the cases and everything come out in this little block. And it looks sort of atomic punk, futuristic, like Star Wars back in the 60s. I like that. I think this is great. Why would I ever trade this in for a Blu-ray of Star Trek, something that aired on television, broadcast television in the 60s? I really don't need to see the original series Star Trek in high definition Blu-ray. I don't want to see every crystal clear nook of the Starship Enterprise. I want it to look like it looked in the 60s. I mean, I wasn't alive in the 60s, but like it looked when I was watching it on the Sci-Fi Channel, back in the day, reruns and such. That's the Star Trek I want, It's not like, if you're a fan of the movie's Avatar, I'm not, but if you're a fan of those movies, I can maybe see, you might want to see those as crystal clear as possible or whatever, whatever. But I don't need updates of these. This is fine. I love this design. I love the shell. I love the DVD itself. I don't care. I haven't even looked at reviews if people are saying maybe the translation from the to the DVD wasn't good on these or whatever. Hey, I couldn't tell. I see the shows on the screen and I'm enjoying the stories and it's great. So I don't see a problem. You can still buy these. You can find them. They're not that expensive, but they still have used sellers sell them. I don't think they're manufacturing these anymore. Obviously, they've got a lot of Blu-ray and 4K editions of Star Trek now. But you can still find these old clamshell hard copy versions of Star Trek: The Original Series, and it's great. It looks beautiful on the shelf. They look like Star Trek. You get the the yellow, blue, and red, like the uniforms that they had, and it's great. It's great. So that's just another example of why of something that I'm just perfectly happy with my DVD. I have no need to upgrade. Again, if someone gave me the Blu-rays, I might keep them just for longevity's sake in case these DVDs ever scratch. But DVDs are more long-lasting than people like to think, and so are CDs. Yes, it's true that it used to be thought that they were going to last through the nuclear bombs or whatever, and obviously they things can happen to them. They can scratch, they can get a little scarring here and there, or scoring and whatnot. Apparently Blu-rays are a little more resilient, so that's great, whatever. But there's still, you take care of your media and it'll take care of you. Accidents can happen, but it's not like owning a vinyl. I mean, vinyl collectors, you guys who collect vinyl, you know how careful you have to be. I mean, just the easiest thing can scratch those, and you have to carefully brush it, and you have to maintain it, and that's part of the ritual. Though vinyl collectors like collecting vinyl, but a DVD isn't quite like that, or a CD or DVD isn't like that. So those are my thoughts on physical media collection, why it's important, and just the way that I go about collecting and curating my collection. And I do hope that that if you're getting into it for the first time, or maybe you've gotten into it and you're a little overwhelmed, maybe that can help you out. Ultimately, you make the choices about how you want to collect. If everything I said you 100% disagree with, hey, great, do what makes you happy. This is your collection. It's your hobby. Make sure you're enjoying it. So you go ahead and get the highest specification, everything, if you want. But I do really wanted to speak out in case people, because I know people who get a little distracted. They're like, well, I can't afford all that. I guess I'll just go buy one and that's all I'll have this year or whatever. You don't need that. Hit up a thrift store. If you don't mind, if you enjoyed watching these shows and movies or listening to the music the way you heard them on the TV or radio back in the day, then go buy those copies that'll give that to you. You don't need everything crystalline clear, and so forth.
An age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.
And that brings me to an end of this episode of the Iconicast Podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. A lot of talking, a lot of me talking. And there'll be a lot of that on this podcast, but there'll also be some book studies. You're going to have a back and forth with Big Al and I as we begin the Outbound Flight book study. We're going through the Star Wars EU. It's something I started doing on my YouTube channel. We're going to continue that here. Of course, if you're watching my YouTube channel, you'll still see it on here. But if you're listening on a podcast platform, you'll hear it on here. We're doing Outbound Flight because I'm a big Timothy Zahn fan. We've looked at the Thrawn trilogy before, and it's just been recently released in unabridged form on Audible. So those of you who, just audiobooks are really kind of the thing that you can work with, you can find the unabridged of it there. Of course, you can always find a nice hard copy of it. Disney has re-released the book with their Legends banner, but it's still very easy to find the old copies with free of that Disney horrible labeling. If you're like me, we can talk about that in another episode, books and whatnot as well. I'll talk more about some of the apps that I use to help me keep track of my collection and all of that. But we are wrapping to the end of our time here. So thanks for watching. I really do appreciate that. You can help me out a number of ways with the podcast. subscribe on the podcast platforms or on YouTube if you're here. But also, podcast platforms, they help if it helps if you leave a review or rate the podcast. Help me kind of grow on those platforms. But also send me your questions. I have in the show notes below an email that you can send me questions or comments, because one of the segments that I'm going to do on the podcast going forward is, reading and taking in some of your questions and comments on recommendations for not for media, but for a show segment you might want. Hey, if you'd really like me to talk about this because you're thinking about this or whatever, doesn't mean that I'll be able to answer every single one, but I would like to feature some of those on the podcast and the shows going forward, especially on the book study podcast. Al and I are going to do the first one, but then once they keep going, we'll be looking for feedback or questions or comments to include in our discussion. So there's that. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. Whether you're a YouTube subscriber for a long time or whether you're somebody just stumbling across this podcast, here I am. If you don't like what I'm saying, you can turn me right off. But if you do, I'll be back. So thanks for watching, and keep your media consumption, keep your soul when it comes to this wonderful mythology. Keep it iconic.